Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's TiCCA4DANU streaming event. My name is Barbara Baničová, and I am speaking on behalf of Priority Area 7 of the EU Strategy for the Danube Region, the priority area dedicated to developing the knowledge society through research, innovation, education, and cooperation across the Danube region. It is a pleasure to welcome participants, researchers, municipalities, policy experts, students, and everyone joining us online today from across the Danube region and beyond. Today's event is a part of our effort to bring science and research closer to the public. Through these streaming events, we aim to present current topics, excellent scientific results, and inspiring experts in a way that connects research with everyday life and real societal challenges. Among the many pressing challenges we are currently facing across the Danube region, climate change adaptation stands out as one of the most complex and urgent. Because climate change is no longer something distant or abstract. In the Danube region, regions, we are already experiencing heat waves, droughts, floods, water stress, and growing pressure on infrastructure, economies, and public health. These impacts affect citizens directly in their homes, workplaces, and communities. At the same time, local governments are asking important questions. How can we prepare better? How can scientific knowledge support decision-making? How can climate adaptation become fair, practical, and inclusive? This is exactly where the project like TiCCA4DANU becomes extremely valuable. The Danube Region strategy provides a unique framework for cross-border and cross-sector cooperation, bringing together researchers, public authorities, civil society, and practitioners to address shared challenges. Climate adaptation is not only an environmental issue, but also a social, economic, and territorial one that requires coordinated regional responses. Through cooperation, knowledge exchange, and evidence-based policymaking, the EUSDR helps turn scientific expertise into practical tools for municipalities and regions. And today's webinar is a clear example of this in action. You will hear from experts working on climate risk modeling, climate adaptation, and justice, local green deals, financing mechanisms, and practical municipal experiences from across the Danube region. Together, these perspectives show that adaptation is not only about managing risks, but also about building more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive communities. I would also encourage everyone to actively participate in the Mentimeter session and the upcoming Q&A. And now, it is my pleasure to hand over to today's moderator, Oliver Ziegler, who will guide us through the program and introduce the TiCCA4DANU project in more detail. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Welcome to everybody out there on the stream. My name is Oliver Ziegler. I have the pleasure of moderating today's event. I have also the pleasure of coordinating a Horizon Europe project on climate adaptation in the Danube region. And I will walk you through our work today throughout the next 90 minutes. We will talk about what Barbara just announced, what kind of risks are there, what kind of measures can be implemented, who can actually finance this, how can we finance this together, how can we involve stakeholders, and so on. Before we go there, I would like to thank you, Barbara, and the whole EUSTR team, in particular PA7 Knowledge Society team, for our great collaboration. We have organized several events in the past, and this, I would say, this is a great opportunity for us to get in close contact with many stakeholders in the Danube region. So thanks for the great collaboration, and again, thanks to all of you on the stream. So what are we planning to do with you? This is today's agenda. Basically, I want to start by giving you some background on what the TiCCA project is actually about. So what the transdisciplinary approach that we will keep talking about today actually entails, why we are working together, why it is so relevant for us to talk about cities and regions. But then before I open the floor to my great colleagues here, all social scientists, climate scientists, practitioners, and so on, we would first like to hear from you about what you are interested in, what is your motivation, and we also have a little quiz for you. So we want to hear from you about your knowledge on a few of these aspects, and it's a fun exercise, and we would appreciate your active involvement. And then we will basically walk you through our approach, which starts with research, so understanding the risks. And we have a great colleague from Free University Amsterdam, Eko Cooks, who will talk about how we can measure and quantify risks. Then we will look at the socioeconomic environment and the context of these risks. And we have Juliane Friedrich from the Vienna University explaining her work. And then after talking about all the research, we will dive into the practical work with our colleague from ICLE, Nina Miachikes. And she will introduce to us the concept of local green deals, followed by our great colleague, Mattea Damastia, who will answer the very tough question, Mattea, who is going to pay for all this? So stay tuned. That's a question that we will hear very, very often. And we have a few ideas how we can approach this. And then last but not least, we will have the pleasure of talking to our city partner from Debrecen municipality in Hungary, Marian Andorko, will actually explain to us what the city is doing and how the city is benefiting from our approach. We are very interested in your questions. So on the next slide, you will see that there's room for you to answer questions in the chat. We will collect your questions, so please keep sending them. We will collect them, and after this, the discussions with our individual experts here, we will try to answer as many questions as possible. And then, last but not least, we will wrap it up, summarize a few core statements, and close the event. So next slide, please. You see, this is your space. So use the chat for your questions. And if you like, you can mention the speaker that you would like to address with your question. Okay, without further ado, I would like to give you some background on what the TiCCA4DANU project is about. It's an acronym. All Horizon projects have acronyms, of course, and this one stands for Transformative Innovation for Climate Change Adaptation in the Danube Region. So in a nutshell, we are trying to identify transformative solutions. So not just incremental solutions to address climate risk, but larger one in terms of scope and depth and sustainability. And we are trying to identify measures on climate change adaptation and in the Danube region. And I will show you in a minute how and where our activities are actually taking place. So our next slide, you will see who we are. So we have assembled an amazing group of experts, scientists, practitioners from various very renowned organizations, such as the Network of Sustainable Cities, ICLE, Free University Amsterdam, CMCC from Italy, Vienna University, IASA, and so on and so on. We have a great cooperation with 4 cities, and I will show you on the next slide which cities these are, and working with their surrounding regions. And we follow the mission to promote systemic and just climate adaptation in the Danube macroregion. But I will walk you through this. So let's get started. So what is the challenge? Next slide, please. We like to talk about cities and regions, bringing them together, because this is basically a situation that some of you might have come across already. So we see when cities and regions are affected by climate impacts, they have different resources, financial resources, staff resources to address them. And very often we see that the cities, the larger municipalities, are better equipped to address the climate impacts. So very often we see a greener infrastructure, water resilience, flood protection, etc., while the regions are lagging a bit behind because of a lack of resources, but also a coordination and cooperation problem. And at the very heart, at the very core of the TiCCA4DANU project is the idea of bringing the two entities together. So the cities, as what we call the anchor actors, anchor cities, and the surrounding administrative regions, so that we can work together towards a climate secure future for all. Next slide, please. And this is where our activities take place. So we have the honor of being a flagship EU SDR flagship project. That means we are really working very closely together with the EU SDR, the Danube Macro Region Strategy actors, particularly with the priority area 7, Nordic Society. And we have 4 anchor cities in the Danube Macro Region. We work with Burgas municipality in Bulgaria, so located at the Black Sea. We have Maribor in Slovenia. We have Suceava in Romania at the Carpathian Mountains. And then we have Debrecen in Hungary, Great Plains, and all these different cities and their surrounding administrative regions. They constitute what is called different biogeographical regions. That means we have sea level exposure, we have very dry areas, we have mountain areas. And all these different biogeographical regions, they require different answers to these challenges, to the climate impacts and the climate risks. And here's how we want to bring the cities and the regions together in a nutshell. So on the next slide, you see our main concept. We start working with what we call the anchor cities, and we develop local green deals. In a few minutes, my colleague Nina will basically talk about what the local green deals mean. It's a stakeholder process at the city level. And through one of these local green deals, we want to reach out to the larger surrounding regions. And we want to initiate a stakeholder forum with regional actors. That means other municipalities, industries from the region, and so on, and initiate a co-creation approach. That's the right arrow here, and bring together the different stakeholders and building on our research and the activities at the city level to identify and also implement joint climate action at the regional level. So this is our path. And how we're doing this, that you can see on the next slide. And this is also our route for today. So as you have seen when I showed you the agenda, we start with our research activities, and that's also where the project starts. We call it our base of evidence. We really need to do our homework, and we are doing our homework. We want to analyze and really dig deep into the place-based context. So what is the situation on the ground like in terms of climate impacts, but also what kind of industries do we see on the in that specific city, in that specific region? What is the socioeconomic context? Which people are living there? What kind of groups, vulnerable groups do we find there? And this very much affects the next steps of the process, which is number 2, what we call policy experimentation and open discovery. We want to build on what we have learned and bring together stakeholders in a series of workshops and identify potential measures for the cities, for the regions. And then number 3, this is complemented by training, capacity building activities, but also by, again, homework for us. How can we finance? How can we get funding for the measures that have been identified? Again, we will talk about this. And then last but not least, it will ultimately lead to policy recommendations. And here, I'm very happy that we have our partner from Debrecen municipality here to talk about the activities from that the cities are already implementing, but also what the cities actually get from our TiCCA4DANU activities. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give the floor to you because I think it's also good style to reach out to you, and we are very curious to hear what you are bringing in and where do you stand? So are you experts on mitigation versus adaptation? Have you heard of place-based approach? Are you a city representative who is very experienced in place-based activities? Have you eventually already worked on local green deals? And then we have a 4th question for you. That's your motivation and expectation. But these first 3 questions now, that's a quiz. And try to have fun. There are some fun questions, so don't take it too seriously. But we are very, very eager to hear and learn from you about your assessment of these 3 questions. So again, the first one will be on mitigation adaptation. The second one on place-based. What does place-based refer to? The third one on local green deal. What is a local green deal? You can also guess if you have never heard of that before. That's fine. It's fun. We tried it yesterday, and I did okay, I think. And I think Juliane, my colleague Juliane, won our quiz. So let's see how this group is doing today. Now I'm looking at my colleague Bogdan. I think we can get started. Do we have a few people on the Mentimeter already? 7 have joined. So let's wait maybe for a few more. And then we open the questions. So we have to be a little patient. Let's say we wait for 9. Okay, can we get up to 10? Yes, perfect. We have 10 people, and then maybe a few more joining. So scan or join Mentimeter and enter the code. And I think, okay, so we are at 10, which is a fantastic number to start with. Bogdan, let's get started, and let's see the first question. So 9 players ready, 10 players ready. Wonderful. Okay, be prepared. You have limited time, so you have to be quick. I will try to read the question. I won't have time to read all the answers, but you will manage. Okay, wow, 14, 15, wow, okay. Now, okay, you are really into it now. So 15, 16, can I get more? 16. Okay, Bogdan, let's get started. First question. Answer quickly to get more points. What is the difference between climate mitigation and adaptation? You have 3 options. Read them carefully and try to answer to your best knowledge eventually. Okay, what is the difference between climate mitigation? Adaptation. Mitigation reduces the cause of climate change, while adaptation addresses its impacts, and that's right. So we have the majority of you are already experts in mitigation and adaptation, and of course we're happy to hear that. And to all the other 4, there's still a chance for you to win. So I'm sure you can keep up with the next 2 questions. Let's move on to the second question. 12 players ready. Okay. And let's see the question. What does place-based refer to? I mentioned it 5 minutes ago, so some of you might have heard it. Policy approach focused on specific sectors rather than locations, an approach tailored to specific needs and context of a place, planning approach that focuses on optimizing spatial and geographic resources. Yes, and wow, we have an expert audience today. It's an approach tailored to the specific needs and context of a place, what we call place-based approach. So it's really important for us to understand the different regions. Every region is different, and there should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. That's why we are actually very busy in analyzing all our cities and regions. So thank you. And last but not least, who has ever heard of a local Green Deal? So, okay, we see now, okay, Tina seems to be doing quite well, and Mr. or Mrs. B, followed by a penguin and a wolf. This, I think, is a great result. And I think we have a third question, Bogdan. Is that right? Question number 3. 17 players ready. Okay, get ready. Question number 3 coming. What is a local Green Deal? Quite straightforward question. A funding program exclusively for city governments, a binding EU law, or a local partnership of actors implementing concrete climate and sustainability actions. And you can vote now. Okay, yeah, wow, this is great. Nina, you probably know most of the people, Nina, in our call here. So everybody's very familiar with the local Green Deals. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have a final result, Bogdan? I think, Tina, can you? Yeah, I think Tina's our winner here. Congratulations to Tina with 2,376 points, which actually doesn't mean anything, but you won. So congratulations. Great game. Okay, now a bit more serious. So we are now very curious to really learn from you. What is your motivation to be here? And we have assembled this great group, but we also really want to learn from you. So what are you most interested in? And learning about climate change adaptation, learning about climate science, learning about stakeholder engagement, which we realize is actually, it's challenging, and there has to be a very thoughtful process to reach out to stakeholders, or learning about city-region cooperation. Remember my first slide on the city and the region, or learning about collaboration in the Danube region. Well, you're all Danube region experts already. And I feel like learning about climate change adaptation in general is your main motivation. And I think this live stream is meant for you because we will be talking a lot today about climate adaptation, starting from the risks, as I said before, to how to derive measures, a few examples from all the actors. So thank you very much for engaging in our little Mentimeter exercise. And I think, Bogdan, we can go back to our presentation. And with that, I actually have the great pleasure of introducing to you Professor Elko Koks, who will talk about how we measure and assess risks. And Elko is an associate professor within the Water and Climate Group at the Institute for Environmental Studies at Free University Amsterdam. And Elko, you have been involved in various national European projects on disaster impact modeling, on climate change and economics. And thanks for being with us today. And the first question to you would be, how do you actually measure and quantify the risks? And how does this knowledge help us prepare for climate impact? So please, Elko, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver, and I'm very happy to be here and walk you a little bit through the way of thinking around risk and adaptation within the TiCCA4DANU project that we are coordinating. And I think what's helpful if we go to the next slide, which is basically the reason why we do this, and I just took some snapshots from some of the key recent big reports on climate change. For example, on the left hand side, you see a snippet from temperature trajectories towards the future from the European Climate Risk Assessment Report, the EUCRA report, published last year. And what we already see in the grayish area, that already now we see increase in temperature. And increase in temperature doesn't just mean it gets warmer, it also means that extremes become more extreme. Warmer air can hold more water, which means we can get more extreme rainfall, which can cause more intense flooding, but it could of course also cause droughts if heat is prolonged and no rain will fall. So just as increasing heat has very strong impacts on our climate in various ways and the extremes that link to it. And towards the future, we see large uncertainties in how this could develop. And we are very much interested in those impacts. So on the right-hand side, I took a figure from the latest IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, this global authority on climate change and the impacts of climate change. And this figure shows, for example, heat impacts or heat stress risk across Europe to population, whereas the top left side shows the baseline and the other figure shows various extremes towards the future. And especially the bottom row are the more extreme scenarios. And what we see that across Europe, heat stress risks will increase and most likely will increase. And we already experience now, particularly in Central Europe, much more intense warm days. And of course, it doesn't make life more uncomfortable. It has serious impacts for the more social vulnerable. So if we go to the following slide, so what we try to do here within the TiCCA4DANU project, we really want to understand how these climate extremes, so not just heat, but also flooding, wildfires, droughts, can impact our lives, like do risks of even mortality or injuries increase, but also the impact to our neighborhoods and the society we live in. So what is the impact of all these extremes to our city, our region? And we really try to estimate, we want to quantify this as much as possible, because as we will see later, quantified risk is quite helpful and important if we want to say something about the effect of adaptation. And of course, that's where we want to work towards. So what type of adaptation can we implement to reduce those risks? And for example, here's a small figure of one of the recent reports we wrote for Burgos. So one of the outcomes of us, and this is just one of the many figures of this report, is that we try to understand, okay, if within Burgos we want to see which how is each municipality being affected and to what extent, we can make all sorts of figures and try to figure out, okay, who's being hit hardest by, for example, flooding, by heat stress, by wildfires, to really then better understand, okay, how should we then act? And I thought it would be useful, which I can show in the next slide, like how do we actually go about doing that? It's a bit more technical, but I think it's always useful to show a little bit of the way of doing it in such a presentation. So I already just mentioned we follow this generalized risk framework. So what do I mean with generalized risk framework? Well, basically the formula of risk is composes of hazard. So the hazard itself, which is a wildfire, a flood, a heat event, a storm, either, for example, a heavily convective storm or some other medicane. Exposure information, what type of buildings are at which location, what is the infrastructure at which location, who are the people at which location that could potentially be hit by this event. And to get a notion of how severely they are affected, we want to know something about the susceptibility of these assets, buildings, people in that area. So we relate that through the notion of vulnerability. And within vulnerability, we want to understand the relation between the intensity of the hazard and its potential impact. And again, this could be for assets, for buildings, or for people. And for people, we generally looked at this from a social vulnerability perspective. So those combined can help us to say something about a climate risk. And risk is then generally your input for your modeling. And I just thought it would be useful to make it even a bit more visual. So for example, how should we go about for flooding? So we have a flood map, and then we overlay that, for example, with our road infrastructure, which allows us to understand which roads are affected, to what extent, to what depth, which railway lines are affected, which bridges. Some bridges might be fine, others might not be fine, which of course can have severe impacts on accessibility to hospitals, but also for emergency response. But we can also take a different hazard like windstorms, and again overlay that, for example, with all the buildings in the city and try to understand what are the damages to those buildings. So I think I'll stop here for my risk story.
Well, this is great, Elko. Thanks a lot. Again, reminder to everybody on the stream, please feel free to send your questions to Elko in the chat. Elko, I have a follow-up question. Now that you talked about how you're measuring, how you're assessing the risk, which I think, by the way, is quite fascinating. So what can we do about it? So there are what we call incremental measures, but they are larger. I mentioned it. It's the name of our project, transformative measures. So maybe you can say a few words about how can we address this?
Yeah, very good point. So I think in the next slide, I tried to find a figure that nicely captures all this. So I took this from the literature, a very nice paper by Gabi Langendijk from Deltares. So there are basically different ways you can look at adaptation. More traditionally, we would focus more on the reactive and incremental adaptation. Well, what does that mean? Reactive adaptation is basically more disaster response and emergency management. You make sure you have everything in place to quickly respond and recover after, for example, an extreme flood event. You make sure that, or a heat event. So for example, if you look also at the examples in the figure, reactive adaptation for heat means we have hospital services ready to go. We can imagine we might have more heat strokes, for example, during a heat event. I think everyone has seen heat strokes and heat casualties during running events or marathons when the temperatures are too high. So you need to be prepared to help these people. And for flooding, it could mean you have, for example, emergency rafts or have good evacuation plans in place. But that's basically more on the disaster response. With incremental, which is, again, more a bit of an engineering way of looking at it, it is preparing, but generally much more from a single building or single asset way of looking at it. So again, if we would take the example from the figure for heat, this would, for example, mean take air conditioning in a house. So we have in the house less issues with heat. And for flooding, this could mean we dry proof our asset or our building, so we don't allow water to come in, or we wet proof our building, so we do allow the water to come in, but you don't have too much damage. But it's all basically from a single asset building orientation. But with transformative adaptation, we really want to look at it from a more system level or holistic approach. And what does that mean? So instead of taking a single asset or a single building, you really take a city level, a neighborhood level, to see what is a collective measure one can take that can benefit measure and can also have benefits beyond just, for example, reducing one specific hazard. So if we think about green infrastructure, it can reduce heat stress, but it also generally improves infiltration. So it might also reduce the impacts of extreme rainfall, but it also improves livelihood. It can make a city more attractive. So there are much more benefits at a long term that generally can even cause a system change for a city or a neighborhood to benefit. So we really look at it from an as wide angle as possible to really cause a transformative change, which can mean different things also at different levels. So that's also something to keep in mind. There's no transformative at a neighborhood level can be different than transformative on a city level. But I'll stop here and leave it to others to further talk about this.
Elko, thank you so much. I think this was very illustrative to derive from reactive approach to the transformative approach. And it seems like, and that's also what we do in the TiCCA4DANU project, in order to really get to the transformative level, you really need to understand the place. So you need to have a place-based approach, as you just said, Elko. So you need to understand the socioeconomic environment, the context of the individual locations. And we invited our great colleague from Vienna University, Juliane Friedrich, to explain to us how this can be done. So Juliane, thanks for joining. You are a researcher at the Department of Geography and Regional Research at the University of Vienna, beautiful Vienna, I must say. So you're dealing with the socioeconomic effects of climate change that basically Elko just talked about. And maybe you can answer this question. So how do climate change effects like the heat or flooding effects that we just learned about affect jobs, businesses, and the cost of living in cities and regions? And how do you approach this? So welcome, Juliane.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver, for the question. Happy to be here. And I think, what we try to do within our TiCCA project is to bring in the private sector and try to find innovative solutions and really get different stakeholders to work together on creating these innovations for climate adaptation. And so for us, it's important to understand, like, what is the framework, what are the socioeconomic conditions, and therefore also we assess like which sectors are strong in a particular regions, which are particularly affected. And next slide, please. I brought you some examples from our case study regions that are also very relevant in many other European regions. So the first thing many people think of is agriculture. So I personally go to the regions and talk to the people on the field. And this is most often the first example that they think of. And it's particularly relevant also for the surrounding regions of a bigger city, for the smaller agricultural-based municipalities, where this makes up a huge percentage of the municipality's economy. So it's related to, it threatens job security and also food security. So this is, of course, very relevant for many smaller municipalities. Another example is extreme heat. And for Burgas, for example, we've modeled the economic costs for like outdoor and manual work. So for the construction sector, which is very strong in the Burgas district. And of course, there you have losses because it's just, the workers face higher health risks. You have some days where you can't work, which can delay projects and increase costs. And this is, of course, next to the very strong health effects for the population that puts pressure on the healthcare sector. They are majorly impacted by climate disasters and also just a warming climate. They have to deliver more often emergency responses, but there are also secondary effects that in the first thing I didn't think of. So, for example, I talked to a medical director in the Podravje region where flooding is an issue, and she told me when you have floodings, there are a lot of mosquitoes who transfer different diseases, also due to global warming, and this is a big issue in their area. That means more patients and more strains on already stretched health sectors. And of course, another example also from our regions, some of our case study regions like Burgas, for example, is very touristic regions, and there are heat waves, storms, wildfires, floods, or general change of the temperature, of course, also change seasonal touristic patterns, and these bigger events can also force resorts to shut down. And in a place where tourism is the main employer, that can also translate into job loss and higher social vulnerability. So next slide, please. And for this last sector, I also brought you an example from Burgas, where I talked to a tourism expert, and he said, last year we had a huge flooding in the touristic resorts. I'm not sure they will be able to recover fully. When we have situations like these, you can count half of the season just cancelled, and in a region where tourism is the main economic branch, you don't have an excuse not to act. And this quote can also be supported by quantitative data, and within the project. And for our first case study report, my colleague Felipe from the University of Vienna, he also calculated the economic welfare losses caused by past flood-related disasters. And these graph that you see there, and again, it's just one, like Elko said, it's just one of the many graphs we did. You see that also costs are projected to rise under future scenarios, and that means that flooding is likely to cause significant economic losses also for the municipality and for the businesses. And I think the combination of that quote and the graph also show quite nicely our mixed methods approach in TiCCA4DANU. So on the one hand side, we use the quantitative data to model the risks and the financial impacts. And on the other, we also go to the region, talk to the people from an early stage on. And that's, that was me. And I talked to actors from research, NGOs, policy, and industry. And I saw that in the Mentimeter quote that many of you were also interested in stakeholder engagement. And for us, that actually worked really well to involve the people and to first ask them, what are your capacities? What are your ideas? And that really helped to create solutions, helps to create solutions that are actually viable. So that's it for now, Oliver.
Well, thank you. And I indeed, I must applaud you. And I think that's also one of our main features in the TiCCA4DANU project, the transdisciplinary approach. And I again want to applaud you how nicely you're working together, with the quantitative and the qualitative approach, not only Free and Vienna University, Amsterdam, but also our other partners from IASA, CMCC, Infras in Switzerland, and so on. So this is definitely a great feature. So thanks for giving us the context. And the follow-up question then obviously is what should or what can local governments then do to focus on climate adaptation measures that are fair and that actually help people in their everyday life?
I think that's also a really important question, especially when we also talk about involving the private sector, because there is also sometimes some skepticism of greenwashing, or that measures are chosen that are more profitable but not really equitable. So thank you for that. If you can go to the next slide. I can unfortunately not tell you the perfect just measure, because what is perceived as just differs really from place to place. And here again, you need a place-based approach. But I can tell you a bit on which dimensions are usually used in climate justice research and frameworks. Also, for example, also more policy-oriented from the European Environmental Agency. So most of the time it's along these 4 dimensions. So first is procedural justice, who has a say. That means that you should pay attention to affected groups being involved in your adaptation measures. The second is recognition justice, whose knowledge counts. It's a bit similar. But there I have an example of an NGO in our case study regions who work with communities along the Black Sea coast. And she said that the residents, they don't really use the same scientific terminology, but they've lived there for 50 years. They've watched the sea's behavior, and they can tell you something that is really valuable also for adaptation that maybe quantitative data cannot catch. The next one is distributive justice. So who gets what, and also who maybe bears the downsides. So classic greening city examples that has happened in the past. If you green a low-income neighborhood to lower the heat island effect, the neighborhood is now greener, the rents can increase, and sometimes people have to move because they cannot pay the rents anymore, which then can be the question if that was a fair measure. And the last is restorative justice. So who was harmed in the past, and are we prioritizing maybe measures for communities that have been harmed by past climate events? So next slide, please. And here I brought you an example of how to adapt to heat waves, which maybe makes it a bit more concrete. So maybe you can just click next again. So first example is an early warning system, which sure is a good measure, but if these warning systems also sometimes don't reach all the people, like for example, isolated or non-digital people, or they don't know how to react. So another measure that we could think of would be neighborhood cooling centers. You can click next. And this is something I've seen in Vienna, because there it can really reduce heat stress for particularly vulnerable people with chronic conditions to go there to just cool down for 2 hours. And it also reaches more vulnerable groups because people who live and work in air-conditioned buildings don't really need to go there, but the access is still uneven. There might be ability constraints for elderly people, or in a more rural area, this is not really suitable. And then the last option, and I think this is also something I just want to mention, that strengthening primary healthcare facilities can be quite a transformative adaptation measure. And this was actually also mentioned in the latest IPCC report as an adaptation measure, because especially in regions where capacity is lacking, it really improves to just generally strengthen the healthcare center, because they can better work during all heat-related or climate-related illnesses. And sometimes it's also, like, I spoke to this healthcare official, and she told me that in another project they developed like learning modules for healthcare staff, how to better do patient care during heat waves. And none of the healthcare workers actually did the modules because they were at capacity. Like they couldn't do it anymore because they were overwhelmed. And I think this is the case in many European regions. So sometimes just doing something where the people don't really have the capacity is really inefficient. And so the best thing you can do is just strengthen the baseline capacity. That's an example I just wanted to share with you, that sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you so much, Juliane, and to the audience out there. Juliane, for your information, is the lead author of all our regional reports. We just released our first report from Burgas region, and I learned a lot from again this transdisciplinary approach, quantitative and qualitative. You and your team, you talked to many people in the region, and I recommend to everybody to find this report on our TiCCA4DANU website and learn something new about the risks and the effects, also opportunities and actions on the ground in our very first pilot region, that was Burgas district at the Black Sea. So, Juliane, thank you very much. I would like to move on to the more practical world now. So we talked about research and why it is important to really understand the context and the situation on the ground. So have a place-based approach and no one size fits all. But then what happens next? And Nina, you are working with the cities. You are an expert on urban regeneration and district development at the Network of Local Governments for Sustainability, and ICLE, which is a great organization. And it's a lot of fun working with you and your team. And
likewise.
Thank you very much. So maybe you can fill us in on your work. So what do you experience? So what are the main challenges for the cities to actually get things done? What are they already doing, and how are you activating the cities and the regions? So maybe you can give us a snapshot of your work on the ground.
Thank you, Oliver, and hello, everyone. I'm really, really happy to be here. Also, I want to clap my hands to the two presentations that will be before me, because they set the scene for what I was telling you about. Also, I would like to continue with the next slide immediately. I want to start with something straightforward. You can click 2 times just to open the whole idea of the slide, because as I said, I wanted to start with something straightforward, because cities are under pressure everywhere. There are heat waves, already mentioned, floods, energy insecurity, social quality, and basically, honestly, what is expected from the cities to solve all of these problems at the same time is quite impossible. So also, one important thing is that climate impacts, they don't stop at the borders, and this is why I think TiCCA4DANU and any kind of projects that are upscaling the interventions are really, really crucial and important for the finding the solution. And in this case, from our point of view, like in general, from the TiCCA4DANU project point of view, we see the solution also in that local green deals can become really interesting in giving the solution to these problems, because they're not only about the climate action, they are also about the collaboration, which we found out just before that this is quite important thing. So also maybe more important, how we can move from the isolated initiative to this shared resilience. The good news is that cities are already doing a lot on this topic. The problem is that there is not a lack of innovation. The problem is fragmentation of all of these approaches. So basically, there is too many initiatives. There are isolated projects, let's say project-based short-term initiatives. They are like literally not impacting the resilience in that sense. And in the end, climate adaptation cannot succeed in the silos. So cities cannot do that alone, as we know. Businesses cannot do that alone. Citizens cannot do that alone. So we need this ecosystem of collaboration, which brings me directly to next slide. To the local green deals, of course. And here I would really want to ask you, maybe Oliver, something also to our dear audience. I would like to ask you, before I start to explaining what the local green deals are, when you hear the words local, what do you think about it?
Specific place.
You can.
Specific place. Could
Specific
be
place.
City, territory, narrow place though.
Yeah, it's in the context of the cities. Also, you can put your answers in the chat. But yeah, this is street, this is square, this is district, this is field, suburb, neighborhood. What do you think about green? What? How do you connect?
Sustainable, maybe
Sustainable,
green
good.
tech, technology, green energy. So anything related to sustainability.
Then you can also open. Yeah, exactly. This could be sustainable, of course, livable, climate friendly, air, mobility, whatever. And then what do you think about deal? What does this mean to you?
Sounds like there's some sort of a contract based here.
Cool. Yeah. You can open also. So the deal is basically, these are the three words that are constructing wording of the local green deal, and basically what each word means, this is actually what it is. This is exactly the point. Local green deals are not just another climate project, it's a concrete agreement for action, and it brings together municipalities, businesses, universities, civil societies, different kind of communities around shared goals and shared responsibility. And I really like the idea of moving from consultation to co-creation in this context. So I would say that because adaptation works better when people actually feel ownership, these kind of agreements, these kind of deals are quite useful tool to get to your goal. If you have any kind of extra question about local Green Deal, we can elaborate for a long period of time, but we only have a limited time today, so I will continue to the next slide and try to explain you why and where the local Green Deals start to become more practical. Basically, one challenge cities are facing is sometimes called value action gap. Many people support climate action in theory, we all know that, but translating that into the real implementation is quite harder. So basically, what it's important to understand that different stakeholders need different instruments. So for someone will respond to regulations, some to incentives, some to information, some to partnership or shared vision. It depends. So we cannot put them all in the same box and say like, now we will sort, all of the problems with one goal. It's not really like that, but we need to discuss about it. So basically, back to what Juliane was talking about, a huge part of the local Green Deals is actually stakeholder mapping. To understand who has the influence, who has the motivation, who has the resources, who will need the support to implement the local Green Deals. Because sometimes adaptation is not about convincing people with only data, and it's more about shared trust, about shared benefits, and basically showing realistic alternatives to the people. Because the climate governance is still governance about the people. Not only governance is anyhow about the people, but also climate governance is quite important to acknowledge that is about the people. I would like to show you in the next slide how we are planning in ICLEI implement the local Green Deals. So basically, we are using the urban sustainability management model. This is what I really like about this model is that it helps cities to move from the ambition to the implementation, and there is a system of the 5 different steps, which then they're developed through the 5 different approaches: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. And we need to also acknowledge that a lot of the cities already have different kinds of strategies, action plans, etc., etc., etc. A lot of papers already are existing, but the difficult part is how do we actually operationalize them. So there's these. Let's go to the next slide so I can quickly show you how we were planning to do that. Basically, the circle starts with activating, so creating the conditions, building the political support, and creating this the situation. Then we have analyzing to understanding the local system and the stakeholders. Then planning and applying. This is basically implementing the co-designing the solution and the partnership. This is a very, very important step among the others, of course, but this one is quite important. And then we have the acting, where the implementing projects, where we are basically implementing the deal, implementing the projects and commitments. Final, but like last but not the least, and quite important, especially for our projects where we are planning to accelerate, upscale the local Green Deals to the regional level and call them, let's say in this particular moment, regional Green Deals. This is scaling these actions to the long-term actions. And what is important, this is basically where I see a strong connection with how to connect all of the dots in the TiCCA4DANU project with different kind of approaches that we have, but they're quite aligned, all of them. I think I made quite. I hope I opened a lot of questions. I cannot see them, but I would like to answer some. But if
we collect the answers
we are collecting
for after the session. Thank you, Nina. I mean, what I really like about your approach, or in particular like about your approach, is how you're really trying to build on what's already there. So there are a lot of strategies and somehow align them and focus towards impact. And then maybe very briefly in 1 minute. So how does it fit in the TiCCA4DANU overall concept, and how are you reaching the regions then?
Maybe you can show me briefly the last slide, where basically what is the core idea for the from the local Green Deal perspective. Basically, the idea is that transformation happens in these three, when the three different things are aligned, and this is what is important also for the TiCCA4DANU, that we have strategy, that we have structure, and then we have culture. Culture meaning genius loci of all of the cities, what already Elko mentioned and what already Juliana mentioned. And when all of these three points are aligned, then we can basically build and share the ownership and make something, make the impactful progress in the regions. So this is what I think also the local Green Deals and all these kind of collaborations are quite powerful, because then you can create a space for cities, for the businesses, for the communities and institutions to act together and not separately. So yeah, I would keep that as a closing point.
Thank you. That was a great closing point, Nina. And once again, so please send your questions to Nina in the chat. And in general, please check out ICLE's great work. And you guys have a fantastic network of cities and regions among your European or worldwide network of sustainable cities. So congratulations on your great work. And it's great to have you as a partner, and we look forward to the next 2 years with you. But now, let's come to the question that I hear wherever I talk about the TiCCA4DANU project. I've just been to Bratislava and did a presentation on the project, and there was the number one question that I always receive, and luckily I don't have to answer it myself today. I brought someone who actually has way more knowledge and understanding about financing, sustainable financing, in particular, Matea Damastia, the founder of the Slovenian consulting agency Antea, and an expert on sustainable financing, former state secretary in Slovenia. And we are extremely happy to have you on our project, Matea. So thanks also for joining today. And I mean, let's pass it on. The question of all questions: who is paying for all this, and what is the role of banks and insurance companies, and how can municipalities approach all these measures, the adaptation measures? Juliana mentioned a few in her presentation. So maybe you can walk us through some funding options, and what is actually possible. So thank you, Matea. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you for such a nice introduction. And it's always when it comes to financing, I'm not financing by heart, okay? I learned through last 10 years. And I learned this is not so complicated, but we have to be super practical. So I suggest that we just go to the first slide. And because this is the beginning of the story, it's every euro, we have to look at it like this. The climate change is here. We cannot go back. Everybody knows it was the excellent presentations we have to keep in mind. So, and the paradigm shift is that climate adaptation is not a new cost, is avoid to have a loss. And I think that everybody today in this event has experienced a bit of damage, a bit of fear, a bit of something in the last 4 years to the different climate events. And also, majority of us, through the companies as individuals, we spend money to renovate, to make the damage. It can be only in the car, it's whatever it is. And we know that we already spent euros for this, and it's already in our balance sheets. If we want to see, or if we do not want to see, it's there. So it's banks, insurance companies, and individuals, we are not some kind of watchers here, bystanders, whatever. We are part of the game, which is not the game, but we have to figure out what to do. So the question is not whether to invest in adaptation. It's, Oliver, as you said, who pays, when pays, and for what. So let's take a look on the next slide. So it's all the time the question, oh, can I get the grant? Can I get the horizon? Can I get this? Can I get this? Can I get this? It's actually the mixture of everything. It's just only how to understand how the actors in a local community can play together. I will use very simple case, it's to understand what is actually the difference. When public money, taxpayers' money, grants come in, it is somewhere with private sector, there is just not profit. It has to be done. And this is why it's public good. So we cover this through the different mechanism, which is calling taxation and things like this. Okay. So it's, there is no revenues. Banks are not interested. Insurance are paying through the different systems. Okay. And we do have system like, fire protection, flooding protection, alarm system, that we get it on apps, things like this. But then what happened? We are coming to the blended financing. What does it mean? It's a simple example is, that it is very clear evidence that if we would put, I will use this very simple case, the green roofs, this means grass on our roofs or trees, then we will save something. What we will save? In general, we are saving energy, correct? And then the money start making sense. There is energy utilities companies, they would be interested, and there are cases that we know all across the Europe, they are interested to actually cover the all cost upfront. For, let's say, for the public school, for the schools, for the university, for nursery, things like this, which is in the public domain, for example, because we are talking about the municipalities and cities, right? So they're paying everything to put the green roofs there. And where did they get money back? Through the savings. It's not that they get any interest. The money is going back for 5-10 years through the savings, which are measured. We can see it. For example, how much one school save on the energy if it has the green roof. So saving is 10, let's say 10, we pay 10 units, and then is the saving 2 euros. 2 euros is going to back to those who invest in this energy utility, for example, company. Also, there is many evidence, and it is existing. It's a EBRD, EEB, and any development banks. They're investing in such measures. What they do, they give you the loan, but this loan is repaid through the savings, but you have to prove that you have savings or that you have impact. So it's how much you save on the energy, how much you save in the water, how much you, it's how much you save because you separate waste, things like this. Should be measurable, so that has to be very clear measurement system. And then these loans are coming in, and this is existing stuff. It's not something that doesn't exist. It is there. And then, we are moving forward, and suddenly go back. It's just, we're moving forward because the situation become profitable. So, for example, we do have technology, which is 100% proof that people like, it's across Europe. I see this in Slovenia, it is in Germany, whatever. I'm pretty much sure all around, putting on the private house solar panels. Why? Because it's paying, and actually citizens are paying, but they do have, they're saving energies, and it start making sense because the technology is so much advanced that it start making sense. And also, when it comes to the roofs, who was yesterday told me someone, okay, so you have the green roofs, okay, you're saving energy, but what you can also do, you have irrigation system, so you use water, but this water can be used on a different system in the house. So there is many circularity approaches that are working, and savings, and the investments start making money. So we avoid loss. So it's just, be pragmatic and see how does it works. And then suddenly we see that the actors in the local community coming together. It's a local government, it's a citizens, and it is companies, large and small and big. And even, you know, when I talk about the green roofs, it's also gardeners, you know, very simple people, very skilled people who can help us to have healthy city. Okay, so it's just to illustrate. Yeah, Oliver, sorry.
No, I just wanted to, I'm grateful that you are on our project. That's what I wanted to, that was my immediate feedback. The second one was the way how you started. You said you learned this, and it is, it sounds challenging, so you have to really understand it, but you say you can understand it. And it's great to have you help us and our partners on the ground to identify potential opportunities. And maybe, and I saw your next slide, maybe you could again take us by the hand and walk us through a particular example here. And I think it was cool roofs that you picked, yeah. And maybe you can dig a little deeper so that we really understand your approach here.
Yes. So why I go to, yeah, so why cool roofs? This is, you know, you put grass or you put the trees or flowers on your roofs. And why I use this, because it is something that is here. This is not technology that we have to invent. Okay, so it's here, it's commercial. It's just, you know, municipality can decide, let's do cool roofs, green roofs in our municipality, in our city, in our region. It's a decision which doesn't make any additional euro into the budget. Zero, no budget. It's decision. And through the decision, it comes, you know, that the citizens or the public authorities will start seeing, oh, this starts making sense. They will not prevent us to do this. This is important. Municipality government and the laws and the regulation will not say you are not allowed to do this, because this is many times stupid burden, okay? It's allowed. And then, you know, it will, the ESCO companies can come, energy companies, and I do see such movements, at least in Ljubljana. They're coming because they see the case, they see that that can be a savings, so they will get money back, okay? So they put green roofs for their money across selected infrastructure, and it can be public, or we can immediately go to also to the private. And then again, when this is coming, you know, and then the private sector start, you know, even small companies, oh, there is something for us. And they start collaborating with the energy utility companies and say, I can do this. I can provide this service. And what is happening? Suddenly, the private sector start moving green intervention because they're interested and they get money. So we can even the job creation because it's green. And then when this happened, banks, private banks, commercial banks has no problem to invest. No problem, and they can give very good loans, you know, for I don't know, for 10,000 euros for very low interest rates, you know, because the impact is already there and is measurable on the savings. Make sense? So it's no single euro from municipality, no single. It's a concept we are doing. We are cutting heat in our city, and we will doing by the green roofs.
I very much like your positive message, Mattea. So thanks for this, and to the audience out there. So Mattea and your team, they're looking into the company registers of all regions we're working in to identify for local companies potential new business models. You're looking into potential as regards to measures that we identify in our research and stakeholder processes, in potential funding opportunities and mixed blended financing opportunities for each individual measure that we try to advance in our project. So thanks again for Mattea for filling us in on your approach towards financing adaptation measures. And I have to apologize for rushing you through this, but in the interest of time now, I would really like to give the floor to someone who actually has to deal with all these challenges that we keep talking about in practice. And that is our great colleague Marianne Andorko from the city of Debrecen. Marianne, you are an urban development lead expert at the Debrecen Urban Economic Development Center, EDC. And basically, you are confronted by these challenges, collaboration challenges, cooperation challenges, funding, but also in general, the climate impact challenges every day. And I'm very grateful that you also took the time to join us today in this live stream and basically provide your perspective on our project and also on this grand challenge that we are trying to address. And maybe you could say a few words about the city of Debrecen. So what are the main challenges that you're already experiencing and how they're affecting everyday life of your residents? And then maybe you can say a few words about your involvement in the TiCCA4DANU project and how we are working together, you and all our great researchers and practitioners here, to address some of your challenges. So Marianne, thanks again for joining us. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Oliver, for the introduction, and welcome you all in the audience. I'm honored to be here. Maybe some of you don't know where Debrecen is, but I give you a hint. It's in the eastern part of Hungary, and please start with the first slide. And it's laying in a very flat and basically water scarce area, and that gives for our main climate risks and challenges. So as you can see in the graphic, we face mainly two major heat-related and water-related climate challenges that directly affect the everyday life of our residents. The most visible issue is the increasing number of hot days and heat waves. This impacts public health, boosts energy consumption, and makes public spaces uncomfortable during peak summer. Another major challenge, as I mentioned, is drought and water scarcity. Groundwater levels around Debrecen have significantly decreased in recent decades, threatening urban green spaces, biodiversity, and water security as well. Residents have already experienced the consequences directly. And please go to the next slide, because you can see the same lake, but in different times. It is Lake Vakeri in the outskirts of Debrecen, which has nearly dried up during the extreme drought experienced in 2022. But the situation is the same right now, as we have faced a severe drought during April and in May as well. Dry conditions also threatens not just outskirt lakes, but also urban vegetation, parks, trees, that reduces the city's natural cooling capacity. At the same time, rainfall patterns are becoming more extreme. Instead of balanced precipitation, Debrecen increasingly faces short but very intense rain events that can overload drainage system, increase the risk of inland flooding, and results in a very expensive damage for the city. In response, Debrecen has started implementing a wide range of adaptation measures. The city is expanding the green infrastructure through large-scale tree planting, protective forests, community gardens, and creating green corridors. Also, water retention has also become a key priority for us. Programs, we have a water retention big program like the TiCCA4DANU program, which aims to restore the water system, create a green-blue belt around the city. Also, residents are involved as well. For example, thousands of rainwater harvesting barrels have been distributed to households to encourage sustainable water use. And I want to highlight a very interesting movement. A new national movement has just begun a few days ago called the No Mow May, which Debrecen has joined as well. The concept is very simple: no grass mowing in public areas to make green spaces more resilient as we can. Also, residents can join this initiative on a voluntary basis, but it's really fresh. And It is important to note that Debrecen has been experiencing a very rapid industrial growth in the last 10 years. Large-scale investments and continuous infrastructure expansions could be experienced here. However, we started to recognize that urban development cannot longer rely solely on these grey infrastructure improvement. Climate adaptation has become an essential part of how we think about the future of our city. And this is exactly where, and please go to the next slide. This is exactly where the TiCCA4DANU project plays a very important role for our city, because this project helps us put climate adaptation on the map in a practical and an understandable way. Everyone knows the concept of climate change, and residents already feel its effects in their everyday lives. What is often less clear is what we, as city users and local communities, can actually do to adapt and respond effectively. The project supports for us a new urban mindset. It encourages us to integrate green spaces, environmental protection, livability, and more sustainable land use into urban planning and development. At the same time, it highlights that climate adaptation is not only about infrastructure. It is also about cooperation, participation, and strategic thinking. One of the greatest values of this project for us that it helped us bring stakeholders together, local authorities, professionals, businesses, community organizations could sit at the same table, share experiences, jointly identify real urban challenges. And this collaborative approach ensures us that climate adaptation measures really respond to actual local needs. The project also introduced us this local Green Deal approach into Debrecen's climate adaptation work, which gave us a more structured way to think and work, because it's not just another strategic document for the drawer. It is a collaborative process that turns climate goals into concrete local commitments and actions. And as part of our LGD formulation, for example, we conducted our TiCCA4DANU stakeholder workshop in March, which was attended by almost 20 local and regional stakeholders. And during this workshop, we identified concrete deals with potential cooperation metrics that will be further elaborated upon. So in practice, this means that we first activate stakeholders, create a platform for dialogue. After that, we move toward action planning by defining interventions, responsibilities, KPIs, financing opportunities, and pilot actions together with local actors. And in the long term, our goal is to integrate this climate adaptation into urban governance and achieve a meaningful change through collaboration.
Wow. So first of all, congratulations to all your activities. You guys are really, really very active, and you're pushing things forward. And I think that's what's always needed. You need great actors with ownership who activate new ideas. I'm very happy to hear that you are really using the local green deals that Nina introduced a few minutes ago. And of course, I'm super happy to hear that that the TiCCA4DANU project brings so much new impetus also to your work on the ground, and also new ideas, new partnerships. If I may, one follow-up question. Since at the core of our TiCCA4DANU project is this nexus between the cities and the regions, and we are also working with your surrounding administrative region, which is called the Hajdú-Bihar county, and together with the Hajdú-Bihar county government. Maybe you can say a few words how are you cooperating with the region, and how are you basically benefiting from this project together.
Okay, please go to the next slide, first of all, because just to frame up
this presentation. We talked about the climate context of the city, but also I have to highlight some more important notes about the climate situation in the county as well. It's not a region; it is another kind of administrative area. We call it county. In the first map, you can see inland flooding risk, and the second one shows you the drought exposure of the county, and it indicates that the same area is very highly affected, also with drought and also with inland flooding, so it's very two-faceted. And also here is the territory where our UNESCO World Heritage National Park of Fortebaj lays also. So in the wider region, or yes, in the county around Debrecen, agriculture plays a particularly important role. And Debrecen serves as the industrial, economic, cultural hub of the country, and its regional development relies on agriculture, which supports its economic position through connections with industry, suppliers, food production, labor market, and so on. And also this agriculture is one of the sectors that are most heavily affected by climate change. Drought, water scarcity, extreme weather events create growing challenges. So it's not for the city, but also for the rural areas as well. This is why it is essential that the concept of climate adaptation, together with practical adaptation methods, also reaches the county itself, not just the city, not just focusing on the city. Please go to the next slide, because also framing, I want to highlight what TiCCA4DANU brings, not just for the city, but also for the region, and also for the cooperation between the city and the region, because we generally work for the city municipality, and this is something new, or it brings to a new level that we can work together, or we must work together with the region. This is exactly what TiCCA4DANU brings at regional level, that the project basically creates a bridge between Debrecen and the county municipality, the small towns, and regional stakeholders. As you have mentioned, Oliver, that the county municipality is also an active partner in the project, which helps us involve their stakeholders, their existing stakeholder group into our project. That this was the very first step that could help us to work together, and we already have active partners in this project. As I mentioned, that we had a workshop. For example, we have the national park or county municipalities as stakeholders, or in the stakeholder circle, and they have an active role in the local Green Deal process, especially in identifying country priorities, possible cooperation fields, and practical adaptation measures. And I want to highlight that agricultural rural areas require different adaptation solutions than a dense urban environment. But this project helps open a dialogue on how urban climate adaptation tools can be adapted in rural and agricultural realities, and reverse. And also I want to highlight an experience or a great example for this. In our first stakeholder workshop, the National Park of Fortebaj, there was a Grandland expert, and he played a crucial role in identifying small-scale, nature-based and green solutions that can be easily adapted also in dense urban areas. So TiCCA4DANU offers key benefits at regional level. Just to summarize, it transfers knowledge to smaller municipalities and reverse, fosters cooperation between urban and rural actors, and supports climate adaptation in county level strategic documents as well.
Wow, this is impressive, and I like your story. That it's, of course, it's a mutual learning process, right? So it goes both ways, and we all learn from each other, which is a beautiful illustration of why it is really important that we're working together and bringing so many different stakeholders to the table, which doesn't make it less complex, but the chances of winning are higher. And if you do your research and your homework and bring the right partners together. And I have a very good feeling that we brought together a group of very smart and very specialized and knowledgeable people. And again, thanks to all the speakers today. Thanks to Marianne for summarizing it, for summing it all up. And thanks to all my speakers for basically walking us through the TiCCA4DANU project, which again started with research, then is followed by stakeholder engagement on the ground, followed by doing homework on funding, financing, and then really working together with the cities and the regions to reap the greatest benefit possible. So thank you, Marianne. Thank you to everybody. And now I asked for questions, and I hope we have received some. So again, this is your opportunity now to use the chat and send us your questions. And I think there are a few questions already. There's one specifically addressed to Elko. So Elko, if you are still around, the question here is how to automate risk assessment and how difficult is it to collect such data? This one goes out to you.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. I think there are two very different questions, but let me try to answer both of them. So when it comes to automating risk assessments, I think that has been done already quite a bit, and that's also what we're doing as much as possible within the TiCCA4DANU project. We follow a standardized framework, all coded up, that we can apply across the different cities and regions. And for example, similar types of modeling frameworks has been applied within the UCRA project, but also globally within some of the work in our group. We did this for the World Bank. But the data point, I think, is much more interesting and also more complex because, of course, we can automate and generalize these frameworks, but they're only good enough with the input data you have. So that's why we really also collaborate with the regions and the cities to make sure we have as good information as possible to reduce the uncertainties as much as possible. There's quite some open data available, but to really know something about social vulnerability or building level vulnerability or asset level vulnerability, you need to sort of get on the ground and collaborate and work together to really improve and do a proper assessment. And I'll stop here given the time.
Thank you, Elko. There's indeed more questions. And here's one. Was there a climate adaptation idea which sounded to you completely unrealistic at the beginning, and now you think cities actually need it? Is this something one of you wants to jump at?
I can jump in.
Sure,
but
Nina.
I would say maybe the sponge city. I'm not 100% sure if this is the answer that someone expected, but I would say this, like in the beginning, it was like removing the concrete, restoring, the green spaces completely was, let's say, very into the future. But now I see it's really practical resilience. Like literally in 10 years, maybe less the difference. But maybe someone else wants to jump in with some other solutions. But this is what crossed my mind.
Anybody else on unrealistic solutions that turn realistic? If not, then here's another one. Can you remember any climate-related myth or misunderstanding you would wish people would stop repeating? So I think this one goes out to climate scientists. A typical myth.
I can also jump in.
Yeah,
if
please.
climate scientist.
Sure. Well, yeah.
I would like people to stop saying like local actions doesn't matter, or like it's too small. It's like we're not doing much with local actions. It's really a myth. It's I would really love to. I would be very happy for people to stop repeating that myth, because it's really important to what we are doing at the local level, especially through the project, how we are planning to upscale to the regional level. So this is also from my side answer.
Thank you. This maybe this relates to to one of the other questions here. What is the most surprising thing you personally changed in your everyday life after working so closely to climate adaptation? Matea?
I just want to just follow up, Nina. It's what is a
please.
meat? Meat
Oh,
is
yeah.
that we need, I don't know what kind of new financial system to finance this. If it makes money, it is protect. If it makes savings, people will invest, individuals and private. And this is a meat that this doesn't happen. It is possible and it's happening. This is the point.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for adding.
I have another idea.
Yeah.
So what really surprised me when I talked to so many local actors is that sometimes also the language that we use is really important, because sometimes I asked whether they have been involved in any climate adaptation measures, and they said no. But then a couple of questions later, I found out that they are actually doing wetland restoration, which is a prime measure for flood protection. And then I found out by talking to more people that really on the academic level and also on the policy level, like every few years, the EU comes up with like new buzzwords and keywords. And till that translates until the local level and to, sometimes people who don't deal with this like every day, but they're still like doing some specific niche, that takes some time. And so sometimes to just ask questions in a different way, you can really find out a lot what people are actually doing and what small scale actions are actually happening, even if they're not framed under the term climate adaptation.
Thank you. I think that totally relates to this other question I brought up. What have you changed in everyday life? And maybe I can take that one on. I'm a really believer now in the power of collaboration. And I tell you, transdisciplinary work is challenging because we all speak different scientific languages. We use a different vocabulary, and I think you see that everywhere in life. It's sometimes difficult to really understand each other and have agree on a joint definition of the problem, and not to speak about the solution. But then when you actually try to switch the perspective and get the perspective from the other person, you learn a lot of new things, and you can co-create better results than if you do it alone. So I think that's my takeaway from this beautiful project here. Okay, and that almost sounded like last words, and I'm sorry if I take the liberty of having the last words, but in the interest of time, maybe we can switch to the last slide here, because there are a few key takeaways that we thought might be worth repeating. So, talking about science, science works best when it meets practice, and that's what we are doing here. Research matters most when it's the people shaping policy and planning. So again, the power of collaboration, we have to do it together. We have to understand the science and the basic facts to come up with smart solutions, and vice versa. If there are challenges on the ground that cannot address, so the best science doesn't help. So we need to identify, also work with the people to overcome these challenges. Adaptation cannot be a privilege. That's our second key takeaway. So climate measures must reach those most exposed, not only those already equipped to respond. So that means it must be inclusive, or you will lose the argument and people will they won't support you. So it's really important to be inclusive when talking about adaptation. And then last but not least, also how I started. Cities and regions, we need to think it together. We need a coordinated city-region approach, which can unlock all we talked about: financing, data, partnerships that no single municipality can mobilize alone. That was our third final key takeaway. If you can go to the last slide, please. Because this is where you can find us and reach us. If you realize, hey, I have so many more questions and I just didn't have the time to reach out to these guys and ask my question, please find us on whatever you can see here. We have our own website. Obviously, we are on LinkedIn, on X, and so on and so on. Join our newsletter. Reach out to our great colleagues from the EU SDR, from the EU SDR PA7. You can find them online as well. You can find our contact details on the website. Please send myself or our communication colleague Lucia, who, by the way, organized this in a fantastic way together with the EU SDR colleagues. So again, also thank you to you, Lucia. Reach out to us, send us your questions, subscribe to our newsletter. And we look forward to eventually seeing you somewhere close to our pilot regions, our action regions. If you happen to be around, let us know. And we look forward to staying in touch. And I want to thank you again for being with us today, spending the past 90 minutes with us today. We hope you learned something, and we would all learn from you. So please stay in touch. Send us an email or connect otherwise, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.